are going from the direction that I see on the screen. We have Hengli Tang, who's a professor of biological science, Michael Steurer, professor of electrical and computer engineering at CAPS, and Changchun Zeng, professor of industrial manufacturing engineering and the director of graduate studies. How did you connect with your industry partner? How did that connection work? And Hengli, if you don't mind going first, we can just go across like that.
Okay, all right. So I don't know how I got on the left of you there, but let's go for it. I guess for me, the two maybe kinds of connections I've made with industry, in addition to sometimes occasional consulting those things, but I've served on the advisory board, scientific advisory board of a biotech company before, and also I have co-founded a FSU spin-off biotech company that's locally owned and operating in Tallahassee. I guess those are the two major connections I have with industry.
Misha?
Yeah, so I've been at FSU CAPS, Center for Advanced Biosystems, since 2001. And early on when the center was started, we established a industrial advisory board for the center. Our funding comes mostly from the US Navy, not exclusively, but a lot, majority. And so we have this consortium, sorry, not the consortium, the Industrial Advisory Board, mostly composed of defense contractors work for the Navy. So there is one menu right there that I was exposed very early on. Our research at the center is very applied rather than fundamental science, oriented. So we have industry partners, industry coming to us, even on projects that are funded by the US Navy. So we have a lot of contacts. And making contacts is, I find conferences being a perfect venue. We early on wrote papers that talked about our capabilities and project we did, and I present that, and after the presentation people approach me and say, oh, can you do this or that, right, for me? And all of a sudden there's a contact. So that's in a nutshell, I would say. I'm also in another venue actually that I just thought about is I'm very much involved with standards work. So we are, I'm currently chairing an IEEE working group, the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, IEEE, comes naturally to me. They are developing standards. So, best practices for industry and standards that are applied to the industry. So that's where you meet a lot of industry folks too. So just a couple of possibilities.
Okay, so my connection with industry, I guess there's several parts. First is like after my postdoc, I actually went to work for the in industry for a couple of years before coming to FSU. And the other thing, of course, is as an engineering professor, we do a lot of research, both basically in terms of sponsorship from the federal government as well as the industry. So we have a lot of industrial collaborations. And in the context of this webinar, my connection is really, we have some, not like Hengli, he has some inventions, he founded companies, or that. We have some inventions and we licensed to basically outside companies, and there seems to be doing well, and there's a series of commercial products in the marketplace, and then they're also trying to make entry into some professional sports market, and so that's the main connection over here. Now, like I said, a lot of our research, engineer research, are not only trying to do some fundamental science, but also you try to develop technology or even better product that people really can use and help improve people's quality of life.
What kind of projects would you say are best suited for industry partnerships?
So we all know there's, in terms of research, you have a basic research, you have applied research, and there's development, all this. And I think for industries, there's a slight difference between industrial partnership or industrial sponsorship or federal government, and particularly in NSF or NIH. Because the industries, when they try to partner with universities or other institutions, they always have that they don't want to do the research just for the sake of fundamental science or new discovery, which those are good, but they have a product, they have a marketplace, they have a technology need. So in those areas, they are more or less, I mean, I would say the thing they are looking for is not very, very fundamental. It's a combination of basic research and applied, because applied research does not mean you just like, you still need to have the science to back up. But there's a difference in terms of what their focus are. And also there's another thing, is, I mean, they are more product or market driven. The other thing, of course, I mean, the timeline is also typically shorter, and the project task is much more performance driven. So that's my feeling. Other research sponsored from federal government, not say they are not performance driven, but in general, their scope or goal is more broad. And sometimes, particularly in NSF, it's basically open goal. Sometimes you do this, this doesn't work. Somehow you make a scientific discovery, and in other area that turn out to be better. That's fine for those type of agents, but for industries, it's okay. If you are doing a project with a company with a particular product or technology focus, that's all what you do. And the task itself, in many occasions, is also more, much well defined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's my take. Yeah.
I guess I'm next now in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so yeah, I completely agree with everything Cheng said, obviously, right? And in the meantime, I posted a link into the chat about the small business innovation research and the other one. I don't always forget. A small business technology transfer program. So those are programs that we are very much engaged with, and found it very good to establish a relatively, I mean, midterm, right? We're not long term, but midterm. Like these projects, if you are successful with phase one, which is basically develop a proposal, more or less, you know, this is seed funding. But phase two and phase three could be a lot of money, right? And so we've partnered with successfully and have successfully gone to phase two SBR, STTR projects. And I can talk more about that if there's interest on that. Fundamentally speaking, completely agreed. The projects are usually more short-term, more focused on a specific aspect that needs a very clearly defined deliverable. And so it suits certain research well and others not so much. It's a little challenging to engage students with this, what I found, because it's, you know, you have a 6 months project, you change the students' focus, and they may not even be able to use any of this for their dissertation. But on the flip side, they learn a lot if they are engaged. So I don't know if that's, yeah, I want to keep it short, so I give Hengli a chance to talk as well.
Yeah, you can take what you want.
I can talk the whole hour if you want to.
All right. Well, actually, so I'm, for my discipline, the most industries partners are either, pharmaceutical companies or biotech companies, so biomedical science. And it's absolutely correct. They are more, industry is more result and performance driven. So for us, they are looking for essentially products that are later in a pipeline, sort of closer to the clinic, closer to the patients. For example, if you're looking at drug development and vaccine development and other things. That's not to say that there are biotech companies that are more focused on development of technologies, platform technologies. I actually also worked in the industry for a couple of years before coming back to academic to establish my own lab. And that company was mostly early stage technology development focused. But my later, my experience with FSU, are both product driven. One main area is compounds that have shown some efficacy in vitro or in animal studies that are people want to take it into humans. So these are closer to clinic. And the startup company that I co-funded actually focus on products that's end products for consumers. And these are actually antibodies. We started out with infectious disease detection research reagents. So these are reagents that can go to the lab for other people to use for the research. And also same platform technology can be used for detecting food allergens and contaminants as well. So those are, in both cases, they are sort of more or less more mature products. So the trend holds in biomedical science as well for their focus.
That's wonderful. Misha, I wanted to go back to something you had said. You were talking about working with students.
Yeah.
And how that there are pros and cons with working with students when you're partnering with industry. Would you, and then Hengli and Chad, feel free to jump in, talk to us a bit about some advice you'd give for those who are working with students while partnering with industry?
Sure. Yeah, there are certain aspects you have to consider. So one aspect right off the bat is, like I said, the short-term piece to the puzzle. Which is, there might be a 6-month project. You have to focus the student on 6 months working on this particular thing and getting results out and documented. And they may or may not be able to publish on this. Right? Publishing is a whole different subject by itself, but which we can probably touch later. The advantage the student gains from this is they have a close exposure to that company. If they're doing well, they might get hired right away. Okay, I have that, a lot of folks approach me on that. And that's one of the reasons why industry is also looking for partnering with universities, is to just tap into the talent pool, right? And so you have to keep that in mind. You actually open up a pipeline for your students to go to those companies. So of course, there are other mechanisms to fund students for that piece. There's funded research on the, privately funded research, right, from a company, versus also a gift through the FSU Foundation to just, fund a scholarship. And that's a different subject. That's not the subject of this discussion here, I think. So I don't know what else I can talk about, but that's really the core is just, I always found it, if the subject matter really fits well and the student does have a little slack time, it's a great exposure. But you have to be very careful. They may not be able to use any of that in the academic side of things, publication and thesis, for obvious reasons. Over.
Yeah, I may add just that that may not be all bad on the student side, because they do a lot of projects. Not every single one you will fit into your dissertation. After all, your dissertation only need like 3 or 4 chapters, but you do project more than that, and there's a benefit side of it as well, because people always call university and research ivory tower. So for this kind of a relatively speaking, shorter term, much more goal oriented. Give you a flavor what when you go out, if you your future end up in industrial R&D or even production, what the work pace or what the expectation and what the difference is. So it's not only a good exposure for the type of work that maybe you will be facing in the future, but also it's like what kind of like a working pace mentality along with the interaction with people working in the real world.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add to that. For my lab, some of the sponsoring opportunities from industry. So it's simply give the students who are more interested in translational research a chance to work on those type of projects, because most of my NIH projects are basic research and they're fairly far from the bedside. But some students are simply more interested in that. They want to go to that kind of career afterwards, and this will just give them the opportunity to do that. And then, in fact, a student who graduated from my lab went to this national, I guess, National Center for Advancement of Translational Science, specifically for translational research. And I'm sure that her sort of slant towards that type of research was a big factor of finding a job there. So, because they look at this kind of research, not necessarily something you can do with your basic research project.
I had a question that is moving more into sort of the logistics of things, but say that you found an industry you want to work with, or maybe an industry has approached you and wants to work with you. What is that next step? Do you need to talk with somebody at FSU in particular? Is there some kind of form of agreement that goes on? What should we keep in mind, perhaps in terms of the legalities?
FSU has the whole support system for that. So I think I actually saw Brent on the call earlier. So some of the connections are made by them anyway. In my case, the companies actually found them. Well, they saw our research, either publications or from conference, but they know they will need to find their office, so they go through FSU anyway in terms of initiating these type of things. So for my, the spin-off biotech, and the initial technology was also licensed from FSU. So I guess once you go through university for everything, there's really not much legal aspect that you need to worry about, because the office does such a good job to take care of those things. So if you're going on your own, I guess there must be additional things to consider. But if you can go through FSU, it's probably the safest and best way, in my opinion.
And we're talking about the Office of Commercialization right now, correct? Yes, and Brent is on this call. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and put a link to their website on here. And yeah, feel free. Misha, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, no, this is a great segue, because you're talking about the Office of Commercialization, which you probably will engage if you're talking about innovations, right? And all of that. However, it's the FSU Research Foundation who deals with the contracting side of things for private funds, research funds, that is, okay? So I want to point that out, FSU Research Foundation. However, and here is the one thing that most people don't understand, is when there is government money involved, i.e. the funding, the industry who is interested in your work actually has money from the federal government. And once you engage, because you have this marvelous lab or other resources, the smarts to help them, the contracting process will go to the Office of Sponsored Research. Okay. So clear it up. The first question I always ask them is this IRAD internal research money, or is it federal flow down? And then I know who to talk to. Other than that, the rest of the process is almost the same, more or less. because all other check marks that you have to go through, innovations, Office of Commercialization, export compliance, big deal these days, always goes to the export compliance office, right? No matter which branch you go through.
So we're talking about some different offices at the Office of Research. I'll put in the website for that homepage as well, so you can quickly find SRA that you're talking about, the research.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Anything you would add, Chad?
Yeah, most are covered by Hengli and Misha. Yeah. Basically, it's like industrial partnership. The funding is handled. All the stuff is handled by FSU Research Foundation, where the government, the federal ones, go through sponsor research. The internal document may be slight difference, but the overall flow is similar. And so if you want, there's a couple of, maybe one more things when you just want to keep in mind. Again, FSU has established workflow. So once you start it, you can talk to Office of Research and I saw Brent here and Beth is, they're all here to help. But the one thing you have to keep in mind is some of the times is like, there's another piece of maybe involved in try to construct a project that a lot of time, because industry approach you because they're interested in some of the FSU technology. And of course, deservingly, FSU also want the rights to be protected and rewarded. So there may be some exchange of a non-disclosure agreement or this. So there are some things may have to be in place before you actually can move on to the project stage. Again, Office of Research will help you with all this. This is just like one thing you need to keep in mind. It's not like you write a grant proposal to some places. Like NSF, NIH, even DOE, DOD. You don't necessarily have this step involved. And not only just for FSU, but for the companies or industry partner you'll be working with as well, because they may disclose some of their proprietary information to you. And you want to make sure that you don't accidentally disclose to the people that's not supposed to know those.
Yeah, you touched on a very hot topic, non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, always start with the FSU template.
Yeah, I guess one thing I want interesting in our field is that not only do you not want to disclose things that you don't want to let them know, you also don't want to accidentally read or know of things that they don't want you to know. Or it could poison your idea because that would create situations where it becomes a messy situation whether you have to prove this idea was actually yours, not theirs, in case you have similar line of thought. So it's not just a one way, don't let them know everything, and you don't want to know their things either externally. So it protects the other way as well.
Right. By the way, that whole topic of innovation, in invention disclosures and all of that is a big deal every time I deal with the industrial partners. And when it comes to the contracting piece, right? And here's where the Office of Commercialization has really done a great job. I want to call out Brittany Ferraro here. She really gave a lot of good advice to industry on clarifying what the process is of a joint invention disclosure. Once you have the contract, the industry folks believe they pay you, and everything is theirs. That's not true, right? If they invent something on their end, yes, it's theirs. If we invent on something on our end, it's ours. And there are certain provisions that you can establish up front, to see how they can, take advantage. Usually, my understanding, and folks from the commercialization team should jump in anytime if I say something wrong. But my understanding is that they can always use, when they fund us, they can always use it for research. When it becomes commercialization, it's where the negotiations start, right? And then there is the joint invention. A bunch of smart people on a Zoom call come up with the idea, then all of them are the inventors. And FSU is typically asking to be the disclosing party. And that the reason for that is beyond me a little bit. I think we should ask Brittany to explain that if it comes to that.
Yeah, IP in any research is important. It's particularly just because the nature of the industrial partnership, things has to be clearly spec'd out in advance. Misha is absolutely right. Most industrial sponsors, they think because they fund the research, all the IP belongs to them, which is not true. And sometimes it depends on who you talk to, those industry people. Some have a very strong opinion, think it's that's a bad idea, but that's the discussion for another day. But from our side is we have to, that's the current setup. So you have to be aware of that. And also if there's any confusion or misinterpretation from your potential partner side, you have to make it clear. The earlier you make it clear, the better. Otherwise, you may create some very bad taste.
That's great to know. Yes, Brent. Hi.
I was just going to expand on that a little bit. One of the reasonings that we want to own, well, there's a lot of reasons that we want to own the intellectual property, but the justification is that the company doesn't pay for all of the all of that project. They'll pay for the project. They don't pay for what's in Hengli and Misha and Dr. Zeng's brains. They don't pay for what your brain produces.
In our facilities, right? Federally funded facilities of, tens of millions of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. They've never paid a dime for that. Yeah.
Even the overhead, then they would be getting a wonderful job. So we're subsidizing and tell me to shut up when I'm saying too much, but the government and the taxpayers are subsidizing industry when we just give it away to them. And we will give them a break in a license agreements. We'll decrease or negate an upfront fee or something like that. So if somebody sponsored research, we want them to have it. We don't want to keep it in our desk drawer. We want them to have it and we want them to use it. So we'll do what we can to get it into their hands.
Brent, I wanted to ask too, since you're here, thank you so much. What kind of advice would you give to a research faculty member who's never partnered with industry before and says, I really want to do this and I have no idea where to start? Maybe we'll start with you, and then also Misha, Hengli, Chad, feel free to jump in.
An understanding of what the parameters of the agreement are, the parameters of the project, and exactly what the company is after and what they want. I've been on both sides. I've been in a company where we sponsored research at a university. And I've been, of course, it goes without saying, at the university. And I've seen it from both sides. I know why that industry wants to own the intellectual property. I did too. And I negotiated so that we would try and own it, but it didn't work. I understand their perspective, but the goals and desires are different with industry. They want usually a narrow objective. They don't care about the mechanism of how something works many times. They just want to know that it works, and they want it well studied, that it works, and look at all the parameters and things like that. And then it's fine with them, and they might even help with funding a little bit if the researcher goes back and finds out the mechanism. The net mechanism will be important to industry, but it's not the deciding factor and the most important factor.
I would say just if you want to do this, talk to Brent first.
Every situation, every potential partner, and the project itself will be different. So once you let the Brent and his office know more about the specifics, the better they can help you. Of course, there's a general guideline, but in the end, each contract agreement is individually constructed.
I know, Misha, you had said earlier that it's so important to have these conferences and to put yourself out there and make connections with people, have industry know who you are.
Right.
Do you have any advice for how to do that right now while we're all virtual?
Oh my gosh, that is, well, there are still conferences to be, to attain. Now it is not the fun that I usually have at conferences when I attend a virtual conference, and it's much harder to make connections in between, coffee breaks and what have you, or go to dinner. But at least expose yourself with your presentation. If they pick up on that, at least they will look at this. By the way, the reason why I'm harping on this conference is because the industry people rarely read a journal. Okay, they will not come across your research if you don't go out and talk about it in front of them at a conference. And so that's why this is so important.
Yeah, talking to people, and sometimes the paper does not include everything, and sometimes the talking points may depend on people's interests, right? The highlighted part in your paper may not the particular things you want to talk to a potential sponsors or about. So the more you can talk to people, the better you can interact to find sometimes not only just you're trying to sell your technology, you can also find out what other people's interests are. A good conversation can sometimes they say, hey, maybe just like saying that, well, oh, we want to do this, but there's actually another things that we have better interest as, hey, we got our equipment and to do that, just that. And
Right.
those things you will never be able to find out
Yes.
in your paper, in your presentation.
You hit you hit the nail right on the head there, okay? Cheng, because you have to listen what they need and you have to react to that, and then the conversation starts. So you hit the nail right on the head there.
Yeah, I do agree. The conference, I mean, that's majority of my connections were made that way. But in the science field, actually, at least the top journals these days actually do a very good job of publicizing their research to the general public. They usually work with the universities, with the research units, academic units to do this. So they would actually contact the press offices at universities where the research is from and say, oh yeah, there is such and such, big, potentially big, high impact research coming from an institution. Are you interested in doing a press conference and all that? So those things do happen, at least in the science field, and then it can get the word out as well. So I worked with FSU Press Office on some of the things we did a couple of years ago, and that generated some connections as well. You're right, highly technical journals, counting on them to sit down and read for 3 hours is probably not going to happen, but a press release, which, more or less dumb it down a little bit, can help as well.
What is maybe the most underrated piece of advice that you think we should really walk away knowing today? What do we need to know? We might not have any idea. We might need to know it.
I would say don't be intimidated by the process. Once you get started, once you get help from the university, it's actually fairly, I know you can be a lot of traps, can be a lot of things, a lot of paperwork you have to disclose, you have to make sure your students students are not misused, and the conflict of interest have to be disclosed, everything. But I would say, because many faculty spend their whole life doing basic research, at least in my field, in the science area, and they a little bit intimidated by the prospect of having to do these things outside of the comfort zone. I would say we have wonderful support at the university, and if you have something that's has commercial potential, don't get intimidated. Get started on it. Once it's started, you will see that it's actually very enjoyable.
I would say is you need to be open-minded. Just like we discussed, there's quite a bit difference between industrial research and let's say other open-oriented research. So for some of us, we all, at the university, we all enjoy exploring the unknown, challenge your intellectual capability. This is, but the industrial partnership we've just talked throughout this, it's beneficial to the student, it's beneficial to the university, it's also beneficial to us. That's why I'm saying you don't want to just like focus on, here's what I'm doing, here's the only thing I'm doing. Like we discussed, the industrial type of research does bring a different perspective. And by that, some of the things may trigger you to think, oh, this is something like actually we have technology or research and suitable for other areas. That's readily be adapted or adopted to this. We can make a contribution to the real world, and that's not a bad thing. So all I'm saying is that we don't want to say to be narrow focus. So this is what I do, and this is only what I do.
I can just agree with what you said. It is rewarding. It's a little quite different than fundamental work, right? But it is very rewarding, and it can lead to a lot of new opportunities. But you have to put effort into it to get to the point where you have some industry collaboration.
Yeah, you need to put effort into it. And also, not only you need to be open-minded, you also you should not get intimidated. Not only just the extra paperwork, because the contract will be constructed quite differently from the grant you're getting from NIH or NSF. When you see there's a milestone schedule you have to meet, there's a performance metric you have to meet, you'll be saying, so wait a minute, all my previous work is based on best effort. Now you basically, you may, in the extreme case, you may wondering, am I signing my life away? You should not be intimidated by that.
Right, and you touch upon a very, very good point, and maybe as far as I understand, okay, this is again, me speaking out of experience, not as a legal person here, because I'll leave that to the legal counsel of FSU. But all our efforts are best efforts. We can never guarantee an outcome. This is the premise of all the work we do. We also never indemnify the industry for any follow-up problems that they may have based on our research. At least from my perspective, that's what my experience is. So agreed. Don't get intimidated. Here's Brent. He can talk to that probably.
That's right. The university predominantly, the university's function is research and education. Right. Commercialization and things like that are a sideline from that research and that's being done. And Misha, we never commit, or in a contract, you should never say this will be done unless, the only reason something like that would happen is if it's a routine procedure. And usually we don't take contracts for routine procedures. The researchers don't want to do it. They don't want, and I wouldn't expect them to. They want to do something that's fun and exciting. That's why they got into this. And those routine procedures, just being a contract agency, is something that will not be beneficial to grad students. They can't put it in a dissertation or a thesis or something like that.
I fundamentally agree with you. However, there are situations where you have a piece of equipment that can be utilized and is underutilized, and you offer this to usage for industry. That's perfectly fine to pay the bill, to be honest. Okay.
Yeah, very, very much so. It's a situational thing. Right. It's the researcher, what they want, the type of equipment they have, and making it available. Sometimes there are some core facilities at a university that may do things, may have certain types of equipment that will act as a core facility that might do more routine type of things.
I want to thank Hengli, Misha, Chad, and also Brent for being our sleeper panelist number 4. You've been so wonderful giving us all of this great information. Thank you. And thank you also our panelists, and thank you everyone else for being here. And in that feedback survey, if there is something that you want to see, if you think, man, I wish they did a workshop on XYZ, tell us in that survey. We can make this stuff happen. So we're here to help you, give you the resources you need. Just let us know. So with that, I'll just say thank you so much and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
playing.
you. Thank you for having us on.